So Indiana Jones is one of those franchises that I feel had the perfect ending. After Temple of Doom got some backlash at the time, Steven Spielberg wanted to send the character out on a high, and that third film was developed as a direct response to the first two. Titled The Last Crusade, this would have Indy riding off into the sunset to get what's arguably the perfect ending for a character in Hollywood. However, just like the character couldn't leave the past buried, the studios came in and decided we needed another one. Spielberg even went on record and said he was unsure about the whole ending involving aliens, and you can see they played up the fact that they're interdimensional beings. The Crystal Skull has a lot of bad things around it, and it definitely felt like the character went out on his back. Years went by, the franchise was forgotten, however, rumours started to circulate we were getting one more movie. I was trepidatious, but when I first heard who was attached, I started thinking, yeah, we're back. James Mangold, he of course directed the seminal Logan, and he felt like the perfect guy to tackle a final Indiana Jones film. However, a ballooning $300 million budget, poor reception at Cannes, and widely mixed reviews have made this film feel like it's Temple of Doomed. Throughout this video, I'm going to be going over whether that's the case, and also talking about the movie's plot and how we leave things off. Heavy spoilers ahead, and though I know some of you here won't have seen the film, I always recommend that you check it out before checking these reviews. If you enjoy the breakdown, then please hit the thumbs up button, and also don't forget to subscribe for videos like this every day. With out of the way, I'm your host Paul, and phew, let's get into the video.
Sorry! But I've been looking for this all my life.
So unlike a lot of movies, Indy 5 actually has a 4-arc structure to it, with the first part being set in 1944. Through the use of de-aging, we've got a young Indy back, and this is a major swashbuckling adventure like the older films. He's punching Nazis, hitting the thumbs up button, getting out of the way of things by the skin of his teeth, and using disguises and his wits to get around the bad guys. The Third Reich is on its last legs, and the castle representing history literally burns around them as the Germans make a dash for it.
I've seen things I can't explain.
During this, we meet Indy's ally in a man named Basil Shaw, and also Mads Mikkelsen's Voller, who's based on Werner von Braun. In case you don't know, after the war, America recruited German scientists into their ranks, and this was part of something known as Operation Paperclip. Ex-Nazis, they never faced repercussions for the war, and they were homed in the US to help the country win the space race. It's clear Voller never loses his actual allegiances to the past either, and early on we also get the idea that he's looking into history. Now we discover that the Germans think they've got the Lance of Longinus, which is apparently the blade that stabbed Christ. This is revealed to be a fake, but the other prize they've unearthed is something known as the Dial of Destiny. Now there's several artifacts on the train lined along the side, and it's possible that this might even be the Wolverich. Now in case you don't know what that is, because I've pronounced it terribly, there's basically an urban legend about the Nazis that involved a train of gold. During the last days of World War II, they apparently fled on one carrying treasures, but whether that's what this is, I'll leave that up to you. Indy is back though, and he manages to get the dial, and Voller seems to go out like Dennis Hopper as he's taken off the train. From here we get a hard cut to 1969 New York, with a scene that plays into the end and an old Indiana Jones. Turns out that his son Mutt died on his way back to his home planet. Turns out that his son Mutt died fighting in Vietnam, and the grief of this has caused him and Marion to go their separate ways. When I heard people talking about Harrison Ford in this scene, they said he was out of shape and stuff, but I hope I'll look this out of shape when I hit 80. Now thematically, the movie actually deals a lot with time, and trying to recapture that feeling of the past. This happens not only in that film's outstanding first act, but also throughout the movie itself. The idea of being able to turn back time with technology is what the dial sort of does too, and it definitely feels like a thematic thing lays throughout the film. Indy's apartment gets a strong focus on a clock, and when he retires from work he's also gifted with a golden one. In the film, we also get some flashbacks to the past and also learn what happened with Basil and his daughter. From what we can piece together, Basil became obsessed with Archimedes and finding the other part of the dial which has been lost to time. Not only did he create ways using mathematics to predict how certain stars would move, but he also found a way to detect fissures in time. Now we've conquered space, Voller wants to conquer time, and he too is just as obsessed with the dial as Basil was. Now Basil's daughter Helena is on the hunt too, and she tracks Indy down in order to get it back. After she steals it, Indy's thrown into the fray, where he faces off against Waller and the CIA.
But I'm not a rapper.
We also see Salah return and he drops him at the airport, which allows Indy to go out on a jet set adventure. This takes him to Morocco, where we get a kind of play on Casablanca before they meet up with some divers led by Antonio Banderas. Finally, this takes them out of the Cave of Dionysus, where the dial has supposedly been hidden out. Here they discover Archimedes' tomb, with him also wearing a wristwatch, and the final piece of the puzzle to put everything together. Now, a character I've kind of skipped over is Teddy, who's basically Helena's answer to my boy Short Round. He's a little kid who's learning to pilot a plane, and he comes in handy come the final act. Now, Voller and his forces, led by Boyd Holbrook, shoot Indy, whilst Helena manages to get away. They take Indy to an airport to commandeer a plane, and dressed in full Nazi uniform, they fly towards a fissure. Now, Archimedes was unaware of continental drift, so we discover that his calculations ended up slightly off. Voller believes they're travelling back to 1939, as he thinks if Hitler invades Poland, then they're gonna lose the war. However, what they're actually travelling back to is the Roman siege of Syracuse, which, as we know, has a lot of roots in history. Now, this happened back in 214 BC, and here we find Archimedes trying to create the dial. Teddy has also commandeered a plane to go after the group, and Helena managed to sneak on the main one just before it took off. Now, the plane they're in is fired on by both sides of the army because they believe that it's a dragon sent in by the other team. Nice little bit of foreshadowing here, comes earlier in the movie, and at one point we see a puppet play showing this playing out. A dragon shown attacking the soldier puppets as Teddy watches on, and I appreciate this setup earlier in the movie. Either way, the plane's brought down with Voller dying inside of it, whilst Indy and Helena manage to parachute away. Archimedes sees this going on, and with his forces he rides out to meet them, whilst the battle is happening in the background. Now, in real life, Archimedes actually died during the siege, with a Roman soldier killing him, which could be referenced here. There's a soldier who seems hell-bent on taking Indy out, but luckily he's killed before things get to that point. Now, Archimedes' last words were also, "Do not disturb my circles," which refer to the mathematical drawings that we see him here working on. This is actually revealed to be the dial in the movie, which we catch the character working on, and I did appreciate that they at least kept this up. Now, he comes across Voller's down plane and also takes his watch, which explains how it ended up strapped to him in his tomb. He also sees the dial itself, which makes him say Eureka, and in the past he creates a thing that will help them in the future. Now, there's a theory in time travel, you could say theory time travel, known as the bootstrap paradox, which this entire thing is now playing off of. So, how it works is that a scientist one day gets a knock at the door, and he opens it up to find a book on how to build a time machine. Using this, they then build a time machine and travel to the past, which is when they knock on the door and leave the book there. This allows the person in the past to then continue this cycle, and it's a complete causal loop that allows everything to happen. Now, those that have studied this principle have said that the book itself would decay, and every time it was sent back, it would continue to get older. Thus, eventually, it would fall apart and stop the loop from happening, which is why it's known as being somewhat a paradox. However, here though, Archimedes doesn't take the dial itself, and instead he just looks at it to see what else he needs to do. Now, Indy is of course fascinated with history, and thus it's his wish to just stay in the past. Helena argues that he can't because it's going to affect everything, but he longs to be there because he's got nothing in the 60s. Helena doesn't want to do this because she finally cares for her godfather, and she knows that because he's been shot, he'll have a painful death in the past. Man gives a rousing speech, but he's then knocked out by Helena, which is probably going to be something that divides the audience for the next 45 years. Now, what that leads us into is sort of getting a replay of the first time jump, with us seeing his apartment from the very same angle. Waking up in bed, his wounds have been bandaged up, and I'm guessing that he's been cleared of the murder that he was suspected of at the start. Helena's been watching him, but we see the door open, and in comes Marion along with Teddy. Solar shows up, but they all make an excuse and leave, leaving just Marion and Indy in the apartment together. Now, in a nice little callback to Raiders of the Lost Ark, we see as Marion says that it hurts everywhere. Though she of course means emotional pain, this is also calling back to that scene from the first film. Saying her elbow hurts, we get a repeat of that moment and then watch as the rest of the gang go out to get ice cream. The film closes out with Indy grabbing his hat from the outside, potentially teasing that the adventures will carry on. Now, whether that's the case, we don't really know, but Kathleen Kennedy has said there could be films starring Helena. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is currently working on Tomb Raider, so who knows if they'll go in that direction, and it also of course depends on the popularity of this film. Now, you know, right, you know when someone says something and you think it's pretty stupid at the time, but then stuff starts to happen and it seemingly backs it up. Well, years ago, yeah, I remember someone making a joke that Kathleen Kennedy will greenlight any movie as long as it's got a British brunette woman who's part of the main cast. This popped up after Rey, and then Jyn Erso in Rogue One, and then after Emilia Clarke showed up in Solo, it started to pick up steam. Now Phoebe Waller-Bridge, look here, she fits that mold as well, and potentially, I'm not saying it's true, but we might be heading in that direction. With her signed up for Tomb Raider though, it's of course very similar to this, and I actually wouldn't put it past them to try and join these things together. We know they're different studios, but we have just seen a big franchise teaming up with G.I. Joe, so yeah, I guess we'll see, though I highly doubt it. However, that ends the movie with the hat remaining Indy's, and rather than it being a final chapter, the adventure carries on.
Who is this man?
I'm her godfather.
Related.
Get back!
Now, as for my thoughts on the movie, I did go in with low expectations, but I was expecting myself to love it after that very first act. I'm someone who's got loads of mates, loads I promise, they just work out other channels, but I've got loads of mates who watch these films early and they tell me what they think. Sometimes if they say stuff's bad, I'll still go in with an open mind and sit there at the start like, I don't know what they're talking about. Now that's how I felt here, and that first hour was incredible, especially the stuff set in 1944. Though the CGI wasn't completely flawless, it was still about 95% there, and when I've come off just reviewing The Flash, you can really see the difference. It recaptures the look, feel, and dynamism of those original movies, and it's an incredible way to open up the film. Scoring it off just that, I'd have given the movie a 10 out of 10, and when we cut to New York, I felt it maintained things there too. Seeing Indy downtrodden was actually handled really well, and it didn't feel like some other films where they disrespect the character. However, the longer the movie goes on, it gets less and less, and like Indy himself, it feels like it gets worse with age. The sparks, quips, and action scenes start to feel repetitive, and I think even just cutting one of the set pieces would have helped with the pace. A lot of the movie suffers from them going somewhere, then exploring it, the baddies show up, they escape, rinse and repeat. You don't learn much beyond what we already know, and the character development isn't there to justify spending time doing the same thing over and over and over again. The final act's also going to be divisive as well. The hard cut that they do with Helena will probably be something that a lot of people rage about online, as it feels like they didn't really know how to get Indy out of there through using just dialogue. I even think just suggesting that he could go back and fix things with his wife and see that there were second chances would have helped instead of her just doing what she does. So yeah, it kind of falls apart there, and it's difficult to argue this movie justifies its existence. You might end up a bit Harrison bored in the middle, and even come the end, it doesn't feel like the send-off we should have got. I actually feel they could really easily make another one right after this, but with the massive budget and low predictions, this could be where we leave it. With Mangold making Logan, I assume this would be the closing of the book, but instead it just feels like another chapter rather than a fitting end. It's a shame too, because like I said, The Last Crusade was the perfect goodbye, but unfortunately, they just can't seem to let go. Now, ironically, Mangold talked about them bringing back Wolverine recently, and he said that Hollywood's just going to squeeze as much out of the rag as they can. Being the guy who directed Indiana Jones, I feel like the call's coming from inside the house there, and that some things belong in a museum. I think this is a great example of why Hollywood needs to actually come up with new characters and IPs, instead of constantly going back to the well with all of the older ones. It's almost hit a point where the aged hero who's out of step has become its own cliche, and I hope they start inventing new characters, because in 20 years' time, these ones are going to be too old to milk. You also have the fact that the budget on this is crazy, and I think it's going to really struggle to make all of its money back. Kids don't seem to care about heroes from the 80s now, and to be fair, even 21-year-olds now weren't alive in the last millennium. So you can see why they just aren't attached to this stuff, and I think if this underperforms, it might change a lot of things in Hollywood. The Flash, of course, has done badly, and I know he's not from the 80s, but there's lots of other movies as well that might make studios stop doing these sorts of films. I don't even know how you get an investor to put money in when it's no longer a golden ticket, and I think it's going to be necessary to start scaling this stuff back. Now, saying that, Harrison Ford doesn't miss a beat, and even when he's playing his younger self, he still comes across as authentic. This is an Irishman level where it looks like an old man stomping someone out, and all the past, and well, other past stuff, feels like he's actually capable of knocking people out. He really carries the movie and adds a lot to it that I didn't even know if he'd be capable of anymore. Shows my ignorance, because the man still got it, and it's crazy to think this guy is actually older than Ian McDiarmid, who starred as the Emperor in Star Wars. Yeah, he's older than him. So yeah, he's great, and as much as Phoebe Waller-Bridge got shit up in the lead up for this, she acts as one of the better sidekicks that the characters had. Sure, there's not much competition once you get past Marion, but she's there to help stuff along rather than feeling like she's a shove-in to replace him. The set pieces are great too when they're flying off, but I don't know if all of them were that necessary. Now that's sort of my feelings on the film as a whole, and I think that the set pieces exemplify my thoughts perfectly. There's bits to like, and they look great, but overall you sat there thinking how they weren't really necessary. Whether Indy returns or not, we won't know for a while, but as an apparent final chapter, this just falls flat. It has its highs, it misses a few beats, but it feels like it's trying to recapture what made things special instead of being special on its own. I am kind of going back and forth on it at the moment, and though I didn't hate it, in the end I didn't come out loving it like how I wanted to. It is better than Crystal Skull though, and it repairs some of the things with that, but it doesn't do enough on its own to justify its creation. That third act is going to be divisive as well, and who knows, they may wheel them out in a couple of years for one final hurrah. Like final file this time .mp4, final Indiana Jones movie, final take .mp4. Now it does kind of reek of like, they made it to the end, but then realised they could probably make more and change those final scenes so things were left hanging. In the end, I think this is just a story that left me a bit deflated, and the more I've thought about it, the more disappointed I am. I did see it, and I've slept on it now, which lets me clear my head before this review, because I wanted to make sure things were exactly how I felt. I think Hollywood in general does this thing where we have characters get a good send-off, and then the only way they can bring them back is by tearing it all down. They need to make them unhappy to make a story, they obviously need to torture them, but when you see it playing out, you don't feel good about it. That's what happens here too, and to have Indy in the end being reduced to being a sad old man, mumbling about how he wants to see history, it just made me think, this is pretty sad. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is going to go down as the woman who knocked him out as well, and I don't know, they do some weird things with her character too. She's got a weird subplot with a gangster ex-fiancé, has a wandering gaze at men, and is the character they use to crap on what's come before. I think she's brilliant in the scenes where she's walking around figuring out clues, but the sidekicks definitely feel like they hold the movie back a bit. And what we're left with is a depressing story of a man trying to recapture his youth because the studio can't let go. The message in all these older sequels seems to be, look fans, you need to let go of the past, but studio mate, you need to let it go. Now I felt kind of bad the more I think about it, but after those early highs, it kind of faded into nothing. That's how I feel about the franchise as a whole. It started off really good, but as things went on, it's just got worse and worse. Now, because of that opening intro, which completely knocked it out of the park, I'm going to give it a slightly higher mark, but going off the latter part, it did drop this down. So in the end, I'm scoring this a 7 out of 10 if you're a fan of the franchise, but for everyone else, it's probably going to be a 6, maybe lower. Now, obviously, let me know your thoughts below in the comments, and if you want to support the channel, please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos, it costs 99 cents a month, and it massively helps us out and stay independent. We're not going anywhere, and if you want to buy some merch, then please go over to shopzeroedition.com and check out all the stuff we've got. We just launched a Secret Invasion Pulp Fiction inspired t-shirt, so if you're watching that show, yeah, go check it out. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a video on the screen right now going over one of the things that we've talked about recently. I feel like we're doing a lot of complaining, but it's coming from a place of love, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you over there right after this. By the way, huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.